In this video, I'll try to explain the Great Vowel Shift and its ongoing effects, not with the usual tongue chart and arrows, but by animating the vowel choreography, which I think makes it relatively easy to grasp and strangely beautiful. The legendary Great Vowel Shift looms large in the English language. A lot of people have heard of it, but I think far fewer know what it was or is, since its effects are all around us today.
When you read, you begin with
A, B, C.
Okay, we all know the alphabet starts with A, but why is it A in English and A everywhere else? It's the same with all 5 letter names. English is the odd one out. The answer, of course, is the Great Vowel Shift. English used to treat the vowel letters more like everyone else. In German, this word is Name. And that's what it was in English too. I'm talking 600 years ago in Middle English. But then 2 things happened, or rather, one thing happened and one thing didn't happen. The thing that happened was that the sound changed, the sound. The thing that didn't change was the letter, the writing. So this today is name with the letter A, not Name with the letter A. And we can show the same thing with all 5 of the vowel letters. Around 1400, the year Geoffrey Chaucer died, words like this were pronounced pris. Words like this were pronounced flees. Words like this were pronounced fas. Words like this were pronounced got. Words like this were pronounced gos. And words like this were pronounced mooth. That's why they were written with those vowel letters. In Middle English, these were all long vowels. Those are the vowels that shifted greatly, whereas short vowels changed much less: kit, dress, trap, lot, put. And there was another long vowel in Middle English, air as in plaise, more open than e as in flees. So in this video, I'll try to show how the sounds moved from this Middle English position to where they are now. Strictly speaking, the term Great Vowel Shift refers to just the first 2 or maybe 3 centuries of the shift, but as we'll see, these vowels continued to change along the same lines, so I feel we can refer to a kind of Great Vowel Shift plus, which went on to the present day. Of course, there are complexities. Throughout the entire period, there was more than one dialect of English, and they weren't all affected in exactly the same way. There's debate over the timing of how these 7 vowels changed relative to each other, and historic written records describing how the vowels sounded at different periods don't always agree with each other. Nonetheless, and although the earlier forms of English are not my special area, I feel that when we look at the big picture and we see the vowel trajectories in action, the overall patterns are quite easy to see. Symbols are discrete snapshots of some quality used by some accent at some point in time. They can't show the continuum between one quality and another, and so they can't show the continuous nature of changes over time. So I'll be showing the sounds moving in a continuous acoustic space. I've explained the vowel space elsewhere in more detail. Something else that moves in space is this. Just watch. It's a hover pen by this video's sponsor Novium. Specifically, it's the hover pen Interstellar, a beautifully designed refillable ballpoint made of aerospace grade aluminum. Or aluminium. Of course, like everyone else, I do use note-taking apps, but as a lateral thinker, I always find it much more organic to map out my videos on paper. And when I'm not writing with it, the pen hovers in a magnetic field at the same angle the Earth spins in space. I love it. It's the kind of brilliant Christmas gift I buy for somebody, then keep for myself. Not surprisingly, the hover pen Interstellar won a Time magazine Best Invention Award, and it comes in 4 different colours. Also, if you like writing with a fountain pen, there's also this hover pen Future, which is actually convertible between a fountain pen and a rollerball pen. But what I most want now is the premium option Interstellar with, wait for it, an embedded shard from the Muonionalusta meteorite.
Muonionalusta.
The shard is 4.5 billion years old. That's older than me. All Novium hover pens come impressively boxed and packaged, and I bet for many of you they'll be just the gift idea you were looking for. For just the next 72 hours, you can get 15% off all the hover pens if you use my code Jeff or hit the link in the description, and there's free international shipping to most countries. From its earliest developments, the Great Vowel Shift involved two phenomena, raising and diphthongization. I've tried to follow what I've read in descriptions of the changes, but I apologise for errors I make in the timing of the changes, especially for the first few centuries. So let's transition from about 1400 to about 1500. Preis, vlees, plees, fas, got, goose, mouth. Note how fleece and goose move up towards the top corners of the vowel space, while preis and mouth vacate those corners, or rather start spreading out into diphthongs which glide back towards the corners. Here I'm using the pointy ends of these teardrops, or locator pins, to point in the direction of the glide. Shifting a set of vowels more or less simultaneously is called a chain shift, with the vowels acting like links in a chain. I've made videos about chain shifts. They can involve one vowel moving first and then either dragging the one behind or pushing the one ahead. In the Great Vowel Shift, there's debate about dragging versus pushing, but a lot of people think the inciting event was the diphthongization of preis and mouth, and to me that fits with the fact that the overall effect of the Great Vowel Shift and its subsequent developments, as we'll see, was to turn all these long pure vowels into diphthongs. The next century takes us from the Middle English period associated with Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales squarely into what's called early modern English, the era of Shakespeare. Fleece, plees, fes, preis, mouth, got, goose. Moving on, a key thing to notice is that by 1700, please has merged with fleece for most accents. And there's face, price, mouth, got, goose. And I think the consensus is that the Great Vowel Shift proper is well and truly over by now. From here, the second wave of diphthongization begins, affecting the higher vowels at different rates for different accents and probably for the different vowels. As with price and mouth, this involves the vowels gradually spreading out so that they increasingly glide in the direction of the upper corners of the vowel space. And here is as good a point as any to mention that in this video I'm focusing on developments in the south of England. I'm sorry, but I can't try to include also the course of phonetic history in the rest of Britain, Ireland and North America. I'll just mention that in the north of England and Scotland, things to some extent stop here, the most obvious feature being that face and goat remain as monophthongs in those regions. Face, goat, or face, goat, etc. In the south, the rate of diphthongization for the higher vowels isn't totally clear. It may be that goat spread out sooner than the other vowels. Simon Roper has recently posted a fantastic video about London speech in Dickensian times, that's the following century. Simon points out that some speakers still seemed to have monophthongal face well into the 19th century. On the other hand, we have Thomas Batchelor of Bedfordshire, not far from London, writing in 1809 and describing all four of the upper vowels as diphthongs. So for accents like his, this spreading of the vowels into closing diphthongs presumably must have started before 1800. For Batchelor, we have all diphthongs: e, a, I, ow, o, oo. Moving forward into the 19th century, we can look at how Great Vowel Shift Plus progressed along two different paths. This one towards received pronunciation, RP, and another that we'll see in a moment towards Cockney. Simon's video suggests, I think persuasively, that these accents developed their familiar sounds in the second half of the century rather than earlier. And it's in the second half of the 19th century that we also get the first great phonetic descriptions of English by the likes of Alexander Melville Bell, Alexander Ellis, and Henry Sweet. Sweet tells us that fleece and goose were definitely diphthongs in educated southern speech. Perhaps Thomas Batchelor's 1809 pronunciations were progressive. So we have RP, E, A, I, O, O, oo. Of course, the diphthongization was carried much further in Cockney. So let's wind back to about 1800 and see the transition to more popular London speech. This widening of all 6 diphthongs has been given its own name, the diphthong shift, though I'd say it's a continuation of the shifts that started back in the 1400s. First, just 2 vowels diphthongized, price and mouth, or pris and mouth, and this spread in turn to all the others, maybe goat first, then face, then fleece and goose, the extent of the glides depending on the accent. The widest diphthongs were probably in Cockney, which of course influenced Australian speech. E, a, ow, I, ow, oo. As we see, price and mouth spread so wide that they ended up crossing. And so let's complete the picture by shifting forward to 2000. This raises the question, which contemporary accent are we shifting to? I'll choose SSB, Standard Southern British, roughly middle class south of England, which for these vowels gives more or less how I speak. E, a, ow, I, o, oo. Of course, modern SSB is not simply a development of RP, as its speakers are far more broadly based. Whenever we consider differences between RP and SSB, we're not simply talking about the same social group at different points in time. Okay, let's sit back and see the whole thing. Now, the main thing about these 600 years of vowel shifting that I think gets too little attention is that the vowels we've been looking at constitute a natural class. That's the technical term for a group of sounds that share features other sounds don't have. The 7 original Middle English vowels, including the please vowel that merged with fleece, were the long, pure vowels of Middle English. And when we look at RP or SSB today, this is also a natural class, a group of vowels that share features other sounds don't have. We could call them the class of closing diphthongs. By the way, this includes the choice vowel, which was there all along, but was serenely uninvolved in the Great Vowel Shift Plus. I made a whole video on the ways in which these 7 vowels, fleece, face, price, choice, goose, goat, mouth, pattern as a group. This is not my idea. Batchelor considered them a group, and Henry Sweet considered them all diphthongs too. Here's William Leboeuf et al. In the Atlas of North American English. E derived primarily from Middle English e, raised by the Great Vowel Shift to high front position and diphthongized to e. Oo derived primarily from Middle English o, raised to high position by the Great Vowel Shift and diphthongized in most dialects. I think the generalization is often missed because a pupil of Henry Sweet called Daniel Jones made what I consider to be a big mistake. Jones had the totally wrong idea that RP, like Middle English, still had pairs of long and short vowels. Jones believed literally that kit and fleece were the same vowel phoneme, which is why he wrote them with the same vowel symbol, and that they differed in phonemic length. He knew that they had different qualities, but considered that merely superficial. He also thought lot and thought were short and long forms of the same thing, and likewise foot and goose, comma and nurse. And John Wells tells us he probably thought the same about trap and palm. The irony in this is that the consequence of the Great Vowel Shift Plus for RP and SSB was precisely that it stopped English having pairs of short and long vowels. When people talk today of short A and long A, short E and long E, etc., the whole point is that in phonetic and phonological terms, those are not pairs of vowels at all. They're unrelated vowels which happen to be yoked together by the spelling, which phonetically is only telling you what they were 600 years ago. But no, Jones thought that there was a group of RP vowels consisting of fleece, palm, nurse, goose and thought. If you're prepared to believe that, can I interest you in buying some of my cryptocurrency? I could fill a book with all the missed generalisations, confusions and downright weirdness that has been caused by Jones's blunder. I mentioned some of them in my other videos. The nonsense of linking y and linking w would be one. Or how about the diphthongs on this Wikipedia chart of Australian monophthongs? Now, you may be thinking that fleece and goose in some accents aren't phonetically very diphthongal, or diphthongal at all. But what we typically find is that if fleece and goose are monophthongs, face and goat tend to be too. That's what we have in Scotland and for many speakers in Wales and the north of England. So the major subdivision of the 7 vowels is between price, mouth, choice, which are diphthongs in most accents, and the higher vowels fleece, face, goose, goat, which for many are monophthongs. And within those 4, we find time and again that fleece and face pattern together and goose and goat pattern together. Take General American, where fleece and face are less diphthongal, while goose and goat have become more diphthongal. In Australian English, it's the goose and goat diphthongs that have a huge difference between back glides when another vowel or dark L follows, as in chewing and knowing, ghoul and goal, but front glides, or sometimes R colouring, elsewhere. What I never seem to find is fleece and goose going one way, least of all behaving like palm, thought and nurse, while face, price, choice, goat and mouth all behave some other way, which is exactly how Jones's blunder suggests things should be. Back to the Great Vowel Shift Plus, and here's Wikipedia's timeline of the changes. It's a useful chart and I'm sincerely grateful to the person who made it. But we're told that the culmination of history is received pronunciation in the mid-20th century as represented by the familiar Jones-Gimson set of RP vowel symbols. The chart tells us, for example, that between about 1750 and mid-20th century RP, the mouth vowel fronted from ow to ow. But it didn't. In 1962, Gimson carefully chose the symbol ow to reflect how posh people spoke then. The symbol was only changed a bit afterwards, perhaps under the influence of his publisher, to make it look more friendly to the general reader. But of course, that's the one people are brainwashed with, and which gets carved into history. Whenever these symbols are used for purposes of comparison between dialects, between languages, or between points in history, we never know whether they're meant to be taken seriously or if they're just being used as vague avatars for the actual sounds. And then finally, there's fleece and goose. According to this chart, they attained the forms E and Oo by 1500 and have remained unchanged in this godlike form for half a millennium. The generalisation that diphthongization affected all these vowels is missed. Henry Sweet and William Labov count for nothing. The wide fleece diphthongs in Cockney, Broad Australian, Birmingham, etc. The wide goose diphthongs heard all over the place. All of these cancelled by Jones's blunder, which misrepresents not only the categories of the English vowel system today, but also the overall pattern of this great historical saga. Thanks again to Novium for sponsoring the video. Use code JEFF or the link below for this special offer.